challenging myself daily, enjoying what I'm doing a lot more. I learned from is basically the value of hard work and the value of a positive attitude, right?
Your efforts are getting discounted because of the family background where you belong to.
So for me, that was more the risk than people discounting me because of my, say, last name. Going to events and conferences and awards and making sure you're dressed a certain way and making sure you're talking about certain things that like maybe were not true to me, and I had to figure out how to survive. Obviously, if I didn't figure it out, I would have figured something else out. But when I essentially had a gun put to my head to say, now you have to figure out how to survive, or maybe you come back and work for me, or you go and work for one of your uncles or something like that. I did not want to do that, right? Obviously, nobody wants to ever accept failures. To the brand that I had built out and to the customers that I had acquired over a period of time, you're living on like the edge of a blade. Like I started to enjoy the prospect of failure because obviously that fueled me to do more. Start to experience it and you feel it a couple of times, it sort of becomes a superpower. Right? Making sure people are taking the right products for their need or desire is something that we try to do both through a quiz that we have and also a consultation that we do. So you can consult with one of our nutritionists and she will give you a recommended set of products. India is a market of potential infinite scale. So I'm not necessarily thinking about this as being a limited time project where we scale to say 300-400 crores in revenue and try to exit. Purely a factor of being true to yourself and your desires and interests and passions. In multiple categories, I wanted to sell online, I wanted to sell offline, I wanted to sell any which way possible. I want to experience. I realized that whether that's true or not, that's not what I desired as an outcome for myself.
It is generally very difficult for a tree to grow and create that kind of impact and name for itself if it has to grow below a banyan tree. And our next guest, his name is Nihaal Mariwala and he's a co-founder and CEO of Setu. In spite of coming from such a known business family, what is the kind of challenges which such a person has to face while building a business? Because generally society can easily discount them in the name of nepotism. So how this person is trying to break that shackle and create a name for himself and build a business in the process, this is going to be a very interesting chat. So let's hear out Nihaal Mariwala. Hi everybody, I have with us Nihaal Mariwala, who's one of the co-founders and CEO of a plant-based supplement brand named Setu. Welcome Nihal, and thanks a lot for taking our time.
Thank you.
So Nihal, what we'll do is quickly understand what Setu does and what are your plans, etc. And then maybe we'll dig a little deeper in terms of your entrepreneurial and a little bit of life journey, and then take it as it comes.
Sounds good.
Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Yeah. So quickly, what does Setu stand for, and what do you guys do? And if you can throw some more light on it.
Yeah, for sure. So first off, at Setu, our slogan, which I think explains a little bit of what we do, is supplements that make sense. The idea is to take plant-based molecules that have largely been present in Indian sort of tradition for a long time and deliver them as dietary supplements in modern formats for the Indian millennial and Gen Z. So we take traditional herbs, things like turmeric and ashwagandha that have been applied for recipes that we all know for a long time, and try to adapt them to lifestyle conditions that are a little bit more relevant in the context of today's young Indian. Categories like sleep, stress, beauty, things like that. So that's a little bit about us and what we do.
Super. Okay. So how was this idea? I mean, how did this idea come up? Do you have some history or passion towards this subject, or how was the Setu born?
Yeah. So I'm happy to tell you a little bit about that. It's a little bit of a long-winded story.
Sure. No worries.
So my last name Mariwala. Mari means pepper.
Okay.
My great-grandfather, it's a made-up last name, right? They acquired it at some point in time because my great-grandfather started in the pepper trade. And when he started in the pepper trade, he started to spend a lot of time traveling essentially between Bombay and Kerala, because Kerala was, where all of the spices for the world were being grown at the time. My family, it's essentially a family business or a business family. It kind of goes both ways. My dad inherited a part of the family business that was in spices. And so I grew up in Cochin in Kerala. and I grew up around, the spice factory and smelling of, pepper and chili and turmeric and things like that. And what we started to realize what my dad essentially started to realize in the early 2000s is traditional Indian spices and herbs were being used a lot in the West for health benefits, basically. So he started a business that was very much focused on trying to take these herbs, extract active components out of them, and sell them in a way that could be utilized in food, beverage, supplements, so on and so forth. I graduated college in 2014, and at the time I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I studied political science and history in college, so really did not leave me well prepared for the professional world at all. And so my dad convinced me at the time to go and work for his business. We were selling B2B ingredients, right? So I was selling turmeric and ashwagandha to US supplement brands. What I started to realize is there was a whole number of direct-to-consumer brands sort of mushrooming in the US at the time. This is about, again, 2014, 2015. And our customer profile shifted very dramatically from traditional big brands, store white label brands, to all of these like D2C brands that were coming out of nowhere. That obviously got me thinking a little bit. The grass is always greener on the other side. When you have a B2B business, I feel like you want to have a B2C business. When you have a B2C business, you want to have a B2B business. So I said to my dad, I want to start a brand. And he said, yeah, sure, go for it. And my thesis at the time broadly was obviously e-commerce and direct-to-consumer in India was going to explode. And preventive wellness and nutrition as a category was also ripe for sort of explosion. And last but not least, I felt that there was a whole set of Indian ingredients and products that were lacking a certain reinvention or an angle to be relevant to this new, young, sort of vibrant India. And so the confluence of those sort of 3 or 4 ideas is what got me started on Setu. Of course, there's a little bit of a personal passion as well. So my wife and I, who co-founded the business together, were both very interested in plant-based living, natural foods, skincare, things like that. And then also very interested in design. So we wanted something that could bring the sort of confluence of these two things together. And that's how we ended up doing Setu.
Super. Okay. Great. So a little bit deeper. Now, if we have to rewind your life a little bit further behind. So you mentioned you studied in US and then came to India. So generally, obviously, Mariwala is a very known name in the industry, known second name, and sometimes that can be an asset, and sometimes that can be a liability also. Yes. Especially when you are not the first or second generation and you are carrying the generation forward, right? And we were discussing that just a while back. So growing up, how has this shaped you? As an individual, because I think you are a younger child, right? So growing up, how has this shaped Nihal and his individuality in terms of the choices which you make or you get to follow. So if you're comfortable throwing a little more light to it, because I feel that entrepreneurial journey is never an easy one, right? Yes. And so you have certain struggles which you choose, yes, and certain struggles which you are, unfortunately get.
Yes.
Without, it was never a choice which you were born in this family. So sometimes it can drag along with it. So how did it shape you as a person while growing up?
Yeah, so I think first things first, I was definitely very lucky because when I was growing up, despite the fact that there's obviously a broader family that's in a wide range of businesses, my dad essentially had come to own and run his part of the business entirely by himself, right? So even though and that's why we sort of interchange between family business and business family, so to speak, because my dad always says that the idea is that each generation does its own thing using sort of the historical connection, or not even necessarily in the same category, but using the sort of background of what we know, right? And so I witnessed, my mom is also an entrepreneur, incidentally, and so I witnessed the both of them from the time I was very young, very much hustling, right? There was no, my mom obviously wanted to be home for my sister and I, but with my dad, there was never any bones made about work comes first, right? Clearly. So obviously birthdays were missed. Like, he would go for months at a time because he had to be selling in the US and so on and so forth. And, he had a long commute. He would spend hours every day at his factory. And I witnessed all of that growing up because he very much, I think, wanted us to be around that because I think it was a defining experience for him as a person, for us, the four of us collectively as a family, and obviously for my parents as a couple. So I feel that watching him both go through good times and bad times, because the only thing that's given is bad times, really. And seeing his sort of steadiness of hand, generally very, very positive and upbeat attitude, or not even almost every day, literally every day. When I was a kid, I maybe didn't realize as much the significance of it. But after 4 or 5 years of running my own business, I've come to very much value. I think the two things that I learned from him is basically the value of hard work and the value of a positive attitude, right? He had many, many near death experiences from a business perspective. But no matter how high the pressure might have been, as most entrepreneurs tend to have, had this sort of just like relentless optimism that something would pan out, right? Um, and that has helped. That's something that I definitely feel like I learned a lot from. I think that can also come with a degree of baggage, like you said. But I think my dad's emphasis from day one that the only way that any of this succeeds is an outcome of how much you put into it, and that while you may have a small base to work with, basically once you start off doing something, you're on your own. So everything that my dad did with his father, for example, or his uncles or his siblings, were always arm's length transactions. It was all very sort of professionally run and managed. That taught me sort of that, while you may think that you're going to get a lot of second chances, you probably realistically, aren't likely to, or at least you want to operate with the assumption that you aren't likely to. So I think while it could have been a burden, uh, it was mostly just inspiring to see him build on his own. Yeah.
But do you face any biases in the society? Because, and I'm sure that we also, I mean, at your level, you are slogging it out, making efforts towards building a brand, because which is a very, very difficult task to
Yes.
do, right? And especially a D2C brand where the brand building needs to happen and it can suck up a lot of cash
Yes.
also. And there's so many more people in the society who are trying to do that.
Yes.
So and when you're surrounded with people, do you face those biases from, let's say, your colleagues, or for that matter people who work for you, or I mean in your social circle as well, that your efforts are getting discounted because of the family background where you belong to?
I suspect that's probably a little bit true.
Okay.
And again, I think that has maybe changed over time. But I suspect that's a little bit true particularly when I started my business. That was definitely true, right? Because I
Yeah.
had nothing,
Yeah.
essentially nothing to show for this idea. The environment in India has changed so dramatically over the last couple of decades, probably, that people have sort of paved the path as successful second generation entrepreneurs or third generation sort of inheritors, who have like pivoted businesses and reinvented them and so on and so forth. That some of that prejudice has sort of wilted away, so to speak. But that being said, I think the more hazardous part of this whole thing, this perception of nepotism and inheritance and
Yeah.
so on and so forth, is one of the things we were talking about before, which is it can very much build this environment around you that's not real.
Yeah.
Right? And sort of shelter you from the real world for a period of time, particularly in a bull market.
Yeah.
When the market is bad, it's a different situation, right? But when the market is good, because of the family, like I said, you're surrounded by access to sort of potentially institutional capital, consultants and things like that, who obviously are trying to build an environment where your ego is slightly more inflated than it realistically should be. And so for me, that was more the risk than people discounting me because of my, say, last name. What I feel now, looking back when I was 25 or 26, is I feel that my ego and my feet were a little bit higher off the ground than they should have been. So I think the risk is more that you don't be humble or you're not true to yourself. as much. I would do all these things as a founder that I thought I should do because of how they look, you know. And I guess that's not the best way to make decisions. In
Can you
retrospect.
throw some more light onto it?
Yeah,
How they look as in?
how they look as in, like, for example, attending events of a certain kind,
Yeah.
or like participating in certain forums or discussions, or going to like a corporate awards ceremony and like doing all this stuff that would be good to keep up appearances, and like of course they're good to network and like connect with people and stuff like that. But at some point, when you do that a lot, I think particularly when you're younger, you sort of get stuck in this echo chamber, right? And you
Yeah.
surround yourself with people that are very much, in the same echo chamber and are inflating their sense of ego based on their, last name, for example. So I think it was a lot of that. It was like going to events and conferences and awards, and making sure you're dressed a certain way, and making sure you're talking about certain things that like maybe were not true to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Nihal, as an individual, what keeps you going? Because uh, we face so many challenges as entrepreneurs day in and day out. I mean, you're always faced with that choice that is this worth the effort?
Yeah.
And I mean, in spite of as much passion you can carry about the subject, but day in and day out, you keep, I mean, taking out multiple fires
Yeah.
in your business, right?
Yeah.
So what keeps Nihal going? I mean, what keeps that hunger? Because, so I'll tell you, for example, I as a founder, what keeps me going is that if I don't do this, I don't have a source of living either, right?
Sure.
Now, so source of living for you, I mean, I'm just being a little that for you the survival is not
Sure.
the challenge at the
Sure.
moment.
Sure.
So when survival is taken care
Yeah.
of, when lifestyle is taken care
Yes.
of, then beyond that, obviously, when you are still, if you are still hungry, then there has to be a larger purpose in mind, right? So what is that purpose for you?
So, it's interesting because for me, it's sort of also linked to the previous question in a sense. And when I think about my entrepreneurial journey, at least with Setu being the last essentially 5.5 to 6 years, I can almost see, like, break it down the middle, right? And I think so. And there's a reason I can do that. For the first 2.5 years, living and survival was sort of assured because my dad said, I will give you X amount of capital that you can invest in this business. And then after that, you're on your own.
Yeah.
And that capital lasted 2.5 years.
Okay.
Right? About 3 years. And at that time, when it was assured, what I said before was very true, which is that it was about appearances. And it was about what does this look like optically, and less, is this what I want to be doing? Is it challenging me? Is it exciting me? When the capital started to run out and I had to figure out how to survive, obviously, if I didn't figure it out, I would have figured something else out. But when I essentially had a gun put to my head to say, now you have to figure out how to survive, or maybe you come back and work for me, or you go and work for one of your uncles, or do something like that. I did not want to do that, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
nobody wants to ever accept failure, so to speak.
Yeah.
So then, at that point, like 2.5, 3 years in, 100% the fear of failure starts to set in. Like sunk cost fallacy a little bit starts to set in as well. So obviously those are two sort of negative forces that then I think eventually spur a sort of positive intent. And it became for me about challenging myself daily, enjoying what I'm doing a lot more. I felt obviously a sense of duty to the team that I had built out, to the brand that I had built out, and to the customers that I had acquired over a period of time. That I felt that I was in a place that we had achieved some momentum, and there was something there that I had a responsibility to build for all of these, stakeholders, but also for myself, right? Because I suddenly started to enjoy. It's a bit of adrenaline, right? You know what it's like. It's like you're living on like the edge of a blade. Like I started to enjoy the prospect of failure because obviously that fueled me to do more. I think very much learned how to accept rejection in that last 2.5 to 3 year period, right? Because the short way, I think I never put myself in a position before that where I had to deal with the prospect of rejection. I just
Correct.
was very sort of protected and shielded, and so I would not have conversations with people about my business because I knew that I would either get feedback that I didn't really want to listen to because I was caught up in what things look like rather than what things are, and B, I never put myself out there to potential investors or anything like that to actually gauge how people might feel about this business. Does it have longevity potentially? And so then I started to obviously experience rejection a lot more. And once you start to experience it and you feel it a couple of times, it sort of becomes a superpower, right? You're just like I don't care what anybody tells me now. Like I'm happy to listen to opinions, but I know that I'm going to survive and thrive regardless of anybody's rejection. And that is an incredible feeling, but that change has been far more recent, I would say. And it takes a little bit of, you sort of have to like unravel all the wrapping and like be willing to be fragile for that to happen.
What does failure mean to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think for me, failure would mean failing my people who I work with on a daily basis. Who, let's be frank, right? When you work at a startup, you work at a startup for the founder. There's no other reason to be there. So for me, that's a big one. That is a big fear that I have. That I will let these people down. So far, I haven't really pushed beyond the boundaries of that to think like, what would it mean to me personally? I imagine it would be pretty crippling for a period of time, but I also know again like the experience that rejection and failure and near death have given, for example, to my dad and to myself in some measure. I know that that's just more fuel, right? So I have no dearth of ideas and like other businesses that I want to try. So I guess failure would just mean the ability to do that.
Are you an emotional person or you're a very practical kind of person?
If you ask my wife, I think she'll say emotional. But if you ask me, I think largely practical. But I find it. I definitely get emotional about different aspects of. I mean, I'm emotional about my business, right? I'm passionate about it. I'm emotional about my people. So I can be softer than I need to be sometimes, I think. But generally, I think I can be pretty objective on it.
When was the last time you felt defeated?
I mean,
it can be professional or personal, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, it's something you deal with like very regularly, right? Like I'm constantly in contact with customers. I'm constantly in contact with potential investors, and obviously, everyone doesn't love what we're doing. Some people don't like it, and some people aren't as excited about it as I am. So you pitch to someone, and they're like, "Oh, come back in a few months," or like, so that happens all the time. Truly defeated or near defeat. I would say about 12 to 15 months ago, we were in a place where the business was very much I was building it in very much almost a zero interest rate environment type of way, where we were spending money willy nilly and doing sort of everything we possibly could. And that was around the time also that essentially my access to family capital to invest in the business was, clock was counting down. So there's a bit of time there, I would say last year, where I felt like it was likely to be very touch and go. And there were periods of time when I felt like maybe we should just, give up. But obviously that did not happen, fortunately.
Great.
Yeah.
So now let's get more into the business itself.
Yes.
So now that we have known you as a person a little bit more, this has become a very so health is becoming a high priority for a lot of Indians now, and I mean, and I've seen that healthy snacks or healthy food or healthy supplements or everything which is plant based is picking up pace in a massive way.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good product in the market. There are a lot of fabricated things which might not be as good,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so we have started seeing videos where people speak about whole grain biscuits, which hardly has any grains. I mean, people talking about chocolate stuff coming in, which does not even have chocolate
Yes.
ingredients
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah.
So for a normal audience, or for that matter, consumer, how do they differentiate what is authentic and what is not in such a crowded market, so to
Yeah.
say?
I think that's an interesting question. I mean, like, it's ironic, right? Like, the history of big food has been uh, a history of largely misinformation, right?
Yeah.
Or extremely sophisticated PR and largely disinformation campaign. Obviously, in today's day and age, it's also very difficult because it does seem like even with new businesses in food and beverage and health and skincare and so on and so forth, there is such a massive volume of information and product out there that it's tough to sort of sift through and figure out what's truly right. It's also tough because you think that maybe how much can you really trust key opinion leaders or influencers? Is your degree of trust in a sports person advertising a product high? Is your degree of trust in a doctor recommending a product high? Who knows what's happening behind the scenes in that doctor's office, for example,
Yeah.
in the context of this. So it's all this, obviously, in the age of the internet, all this like sort of, speculation about what's actually good and what's not. And I think more generally, it's just a question of, for me personally, the way I approach things is I do my own research, but I tend to not fully like form a picture based on what I read online, because obviously, if you do a WebMD in a certain direction and you say my knee is hurting, you will define yourself
Yeah.
as having osteoarthritis,
Yeah.
right? It's very easy to do.
Yeah.
So you try to tend to get a picture from what's going on online, and ultimately the proof of the pudding is in the eating, right? With products like this, 90% of the time. So I think with health, you have to be extremely self-aware about how you feel. A whole grain biscuit full of maida and sugar is not bad for everyone.
Yeah.
Right? It might not be optimal for you, but maybe for me, it's exactly what I need to get my day kick-started. Right?
Sure.
And I think that's where like you really have to be a little bit experimentative in your approach as a consumer. And I think the good thing about the market in India today is you have an abundance of brands that allows you the ability to be experimentative. So I think more so than ever, the consumer really is in a position of power with their ability to try out all these different things and find regimens that work. The other thing that obviously we try to do in the context of Setu is make sure everything that we build is extremely credible and scientific, right? So any product that we use typically is shaped around one hero ingredient that doesn't have an emerging but has a very established body of science behind it, right? So the other thing that I think we are trying to do to help people figure out a little bit better if a product works for them or not, and how we're trying to have a slightly different experience to what's typically out there. One is this layer of personalization, right?
Okay.
Obviously, context is super important for what you're taking in your sort of health journey. So making sure people are taking the right products for their need or desire is something that we try to do both through a quiz that we have and also a consultation that we do. So you can consult with one of our nutritionists and she will give you a recommended set of products. That's one level. The second is habit building, where the essence of getting something good out of a product is consistent and regular consumption of it in the right way, right? So what we're trying to do now is have a mobile app that gives you reminders, helps you track streaks and get rewards for your consumption. So actually building a habit of consumption. Because typically with, even with a healthier food alternative, you can perceive the impact almost immediately. But typically you should, consume something for a few months, a couple of, at least 4 to 6 weeks to start to see some sort of outcome. So that's another sort of dimension that we're trying to add. And the third is transparency, right? Can you trust what's in the product? Does the label actually reflect what's in the product? And we know full well there are many, many examples of companies at large scale and small scale effectively lying on labels, right?
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do towards that end is do a lot of testing around the quality of our product, not just at manufacturing, but through the life cycle of the product, which is typically 18 to 24 months, and then have that testing be available to you.
Oh,
So
wow.
you as a customer on demand can say, I want to know this batch of my probiotic, where has it come from? What does the probiotic count in it look like today if it was manufactured 18 months ago? These are not features we've necessarily fully built out at scale, but these are things we want to do to have a differentiated customer experience around what can be a product that requires a lot of trust building, so to speak.
Sure, sure. So, how big can this become? I mean, this industry, what is your view about this industry itself?
So it's quite interesting, right? If you look at different cuts of information and data, there's a lot of scale that's already been built,
Sure.
right? To give you an example, a brand like Zincovit, which functionally is a multivitamin. Obviously, the channel of customer acquisition and the channel of sale is very different to what we do, but functionally benefit is not dissimilar. Say a product like Live 52, these on their own as single product brands are in the 400-500 crore range.
Wow.
So they're quite large. Then when you look at consumer health businesses, for example, P&G Consumer Health and so on and so forth, that again, Evian, Becosul, so on and so forth, you know, revenue in the thousands of crores
Yeah.
for a company like that.
Yeah.
So I very much believe that not dissimilar to the likes of direct-to-consumer brands in India that have successfully built large-scale, Mamaearth and Boat being prime examples among them. I don't see any reason why you can't build, say, 1,000 crore revenue supplements player in this country. For example, Himalaya is already one of those, right? I
Yeah.
would say, in some sense. Again,
Sure.
customer acquisition channel is different, distribution channel is different, but fundamentally, they are selling thousands of crores worth of herbal supplements to people in this country.
Yeah.
Right? So, um, I mean, I'm one of those believers that India is a market of potential infinite scale. So
Sure.
I'm not necessarily thinking about this as being a limited time project where we scale to, say 300-400 crores in revenue and try to exit. I see this as being a business of longevity.
Sure.
Literally in the nature of the product, but also in the nature of the business.
Understood.
Because ultimately, if you build a loyal and committed base of users, one, of course, word of mouth virality in health is significant. Two, stickiness is very high. So those are the two things we're excited about in the context of our channel. We feel that for direct to consumer, this is a very natural product category, product channel fit, so to speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
And healthcare is one of the categories.
Yeah.
Obviously, healthcare is a category which you are in. But if you have to put your money in any other industry or category,
Yeah.
let's say going forward, which
Yeah.
you are quite upbeat about,
Yeah.
going by the market condition or the need of the market, what kind of industries you would be, upbeat about?
Yeah, so I think generally, obviously, the entire consumption story. So whether that be what we're doing, which is wellness and healthcare, or skincare, or better for you foods and beverages and stuff like that. I think generally that whole basket is obviously something that's very exciting. I think our experience obviously has been borne out through Setu, but also through the category more generally. Very very difficult though, right? And large amounts of capital to be able to actually build good brands. The other area that I am very excited by more generally is this whole, and it could be a little bit controversial, but this whole category of sort of fun entertainment, almost vice in a
Yeah.
sense, right? Where India is just such a young country, and the demand far outstrips the supply consistently in eating out, in events, in obviously we're seeing it now in alcohol and things like that. So that whole basket of things, I think, is undoubtedly a good bet as an area. Obviously, within them, you have to figure out the right investments to pick. But broadly, I would say, better for you consumption, and then maybe not better for you so much behaviors, but big opportunity areas. I think, for example, ticketing in events is still a large area where Book My Show for some reason has an unnatural, effectively a monopoly.
Yeah.
I think that's a space that's primed for someone to come along and try to do something more at least competitive,
Sure.
so to speak. And again, yeah, entertainment, events, going out. I mean, you go to any bar or restaurant in Bombay or Bangalore, centrally located on a Friday or Saturday night, and they are all at capacity.
Correct.
Consistently.
Correct.
Obviously, a very tough business to be in,
Yeah.
but an exciting one, I think, nevertheless.
Okay. Super. And so, last question, Nihal. So there are two, three kind of people who want to. So let's say if in case, I mean, I was a professional who worked in a job for roughly 14 years, right? And it always had. So I always had this in my mind that I want to do something on my own, but I never had the courage to take that plunge because of lack of resources or funds or whatever is the case. And there's always this lack of belief that can I do it alone,
Yeah.
right? And then there are people who are fresh out of college who have a lot of aspiration, belief, that courage, so to say, and full of ideas who want to start out. And then there are people like you who are second or third generation or fourth generation folks who belong to entrepreneurial families but who want to carve a niche of their own, right? So if you have to give an advice to somebody who comes with a similar background as yours,
Yeah.
and wants to carve out a niche for themselves, having walked that journey yourself for the last 4 5 years, what are the pros and cons, or for that matter, what are the pitfalls which that person should be aware of, which can help them maybe shorten that journey towards building something of their own?
Yeah, I would say just one thing, and I would say it is purely a factor of being true to yourself and your desires and interests and passions. I think the only times that I did not enjoy in my journey were times where I was effectively feeling some degree of imposter syndrome, right?
Sure.
Some degree of, this is what a startup founder looks like and behaves like. This is what a startup should look like.
Yeah.
From what you read and consume in the outside world. And obviously, again, in the age of the internet, it's very, very easy to read about all these businesses and how much money they've raised and what they've done and think that it's all, glamour and fun and games. And then obviously the reality is quite different from that. So I think for me, the greatest learning has been that. And our success has only come from some degree of honesty in that endeavor. When we started, I was so caught up in this belief that the market will chase the player who's the largest, the market will chase this and that I wanted to do everything at once. I wanted to be in multiple categories. I wanted to sell online. I wanted to sell offline. I wanted to sell, any which way possible. I wanted to acquire customers at any price. All in the belief that this would build some sort of mythical scale, and then ultimately they will come.
Yeah.
Right, which could be true for some businesses, but I think as I saw that pan out and I started to reflect on my experience, I realized that whether that's true or not, that's not what I desired as an outcome for myself. Right, I want to build a business that is focused, that is leaner, that is concentrated on a select few products and categories where we justify our price. We don't just do things for the sake of doing them. And that was a process of evolution that took me, like I said, 3 years, 4 years, and burnt capital to figure out.
Yeah.
And I think what I would say to anyone that's and maybe people will say in retrospect that that should be your first instinct from day one, but I would just say that if you have an idea, if you have an angle, if you have a product that you're passionate about or interested in, you have to stay true to that reality. You cannot go chasing the bells and whistles because the market looks a certain way or you see companies that you think you should replicate.
Yeah.
And so our best success has come from that. It's from staying true to ourselves.
Super.
Yeah.
Okay. And now that you have spoken about success, so I've already asked you what does failure mean to you,
Yeah.
but to wrap it up, what does success mean to Nihal as such?
Yeah, so I think there's two aspects to it. One is obviously some measure of financial success that validates what I'm doing, and by that I don't mean necessarily a large exit or something like that. I more mean the first thing for me, early on was I can't be burning money to put products in the hands of customers.
Yeah.
Conceptually, that's something that I was very much struggling with. I was like, if that is the case, then do I have the right product, right? So fundamentally for me, I want to be able to sell um, these products and some degree of services that make the lives of people better in a meaningful way, such that I can command a price premium relative to the market, that I can command a loyal and committed base of users, that I don't have to sort of break my head to acquire customers because my product and my brand speaks for itself, right? So again, obviously, we talked a little bit about scale. I think in the few hundreds to a thousand, early thousands of crores is a possible scale to be built from supplements and wellness as a category, and I think there are many cases that are already on the path there, hopefully including ours. So that's one in terms of financial outcome. Two, obviously we have people that are participating with us in this journey, employees, who effectively are also part owners of the company, right? We obviously compensate people in ESOPs as most businesses do today. Uh, and I think for me to reward their faith in me with a potential large payoff would be very satisfying. So that's a second. So obviously financial success for myself, financial success for the people around me that have worked with me on this journey, and success of product and brand, where people want to talk about it, where people are impassioned about it at whatever scale.
Sure.
I think that's the most validation you can get, right? Is when people say to you, "Oh, I love this product," or "I love what this campaign looks like," or that to me is really what we do all of this for, essentially at the end of the day. And if that happens, then the first two sort of follow as a natural consequence.
Sure. Great. So thanks a lot,
Thank
Nihal,
you.
firstly for your time. And I would just like to summarize, basis our conversation. What I feel is that so there is a lot of stigma in the industry that and when we covered the life of Nihal itself, we got to understand that nobody gets it easy, and everybody has their own levels of struggles when it comes to entrepreneurship, whether they start afresh or they have a backing, so-called backing. So that is what I believe that through this conversation, that is what we have gathered from it, and how to tackle it also, because the kind of learnings which you have given us over the last through your journey, or over the last 5 years, has been quite enriching, thankfully. And I would urge our viewers that do if in case you want to watch or look at similar such stories, or if you have any suggestions, please do comment on our video. We are available on podcast, on Spotify, YouTube, as well as Instagram. So I would request you to subscribe on our channel, so that we can bring you as many such stories to you as possible, and maybe we can help more and more people who are on the edge become those entrepreneurs
Let's
and
hope
change
so.
lives.
Yeah.
So good luck,
Thank
Nihal,
you.
and thanks a lot for taking
Thank you.
out time
Thanks for
for
your
us.
time.